So, how do you actually behave in a functional way, in a godly way, in a spiritual way? So, previously in chapter 2, we learned about the origins, the source of the godly soul. In chapter 3, we learned about the very nature of the faculties and the structure and the makeup of the godly soul. And in chapter 4, today we're going to study about how this godly soul actually finds expression through which it can functionally behave in a holy, godly way. So the Alter Rebbe says, every soul has three garments. Now, the metaphor of garment is very interesting. What's a garment? A garment is not something that is intrinsic, that is essentially part of you. It's something external to you. A garment you can put on, you can take off, you can choose which garment you want to wear each day or each moment of the day. But at the same time, it's through our garments that we actually express who we are, how we're feeling, and who we want to be. So the garment is a very powerful tool. And the soul has three garments, and they are the three functional ways through which we behave. Machshava, our thoughts; dibur, our words and our speech; and maaseh, our behavior, our action, and our deeds. So therefore, when a person utilizes these three garments as tools, as vehicles to express the godly soul, so in their thoughts, they're constantly preoccupied with the study and the connection with understanding Torah. And with the rest of their organs and their limbs of their body, they're constantly preoccupied with trying to behave in accordance with the Torah and doing the mitzvot and doing the good deeds. More specifically, the Alter Rebbe explains, when through one's thoughts one is trying their best to fully connect with and understand as much Torah as they can, and there are two ways to know how a person is truly expressing their best with the Torah. One is according to their intellectual ability. Every person is given their level of IQ, their ability to understand. So they use the best of the extent of their intellectual capabilities to understand all of Torah. And then their mind and their thoughts are being the tool which is expressing the wisdom and the knowledge of Torah. Second of all, every person has their own intellectual aptitude of how they can connect with Torah. In other words, Torah is divided in general on four levels, known in the Talmud as the Pardes, as the orchard of Torah. And Pardes is spelled through four letters, Pei, Resh, Dalet, Samach, which stands for Pshat, that's the simple meaning of Torah; Remez, the hints in the words of Torah; Drush, the homiletical expressions and interpretations of Torah; and Sod, the mystical teachings of Torah. As we learned earlier, even though all souls come from the same source, but on their level of development and descent down here, they're all fashioned and shaped differently. So your soul has a particular connection normally to one of the four levels of Torah more than the others. You're more skilled to excel or succeed in one level over the other. So when a person is utilizing the extent of their abilities to understand Torah, then the Alter Rebbe says, interestingly, all of the 613 organs of your soul are bound with the 613 organs of the Torah. It's an interesting expression. What does that mean? The Talmud tells us that every body has 613 parts as well. Now, let's not think about the science behind this, but the Talmud says there are 248 Evarim, limbs, and 365 Gidim, muscles, sinews, blood vessels. So we're shaped with 613 parts to our body. That is because we are created through the 613 organs of the soul. And the soul has that number because the soul is created through the 613 organs or part of the Torah, which are the 613 mitzvot commands. And the Torah is that way because it is a reflection of, it's a creation of the 613 organs of God. Of course, God has no organs, but he chose to manifest his essential being in the 613 ways, which become the mitzvot, the commands of the Torah, which become the levels of the soul and the anatomy of the body. So we're trying to fuse all of these together in a very holistic bond. So the mind is connecting, your thought is connecting to this entire gamut of the abilities of the soul through the study and immersion in Torah. And then you're giving expression to your emotions of the soul, as we learned about in last class, through the performance of the mitzvot, of the good deeds. If you can make sure that as much as possible, all of your behavior, all of your deeds are doing a mitzvah or doing something good as is appropriate by the Torah, then you're also connecting the emotions of the soul to the Torah as well. So this is already challenging us and telling us how to try to live out every single moment of our lives through all of our abilities, thought, speech, and action. Now, the three of them are different because our thoughts, and that's much more challenging. We can never stop thinking. Our thoughts are running the whole time. And how many of our thoughts are appropriate? How many of our thoughts are focused on something that is productive, that the Torah would approve of? So to be able to control and master our thoughts in a way that they're always bound up with something true, something genuine, something productive, that's very challenging. Next is our words. So our words, we can choose to use when we want. However, we use them quite a lot and don't always have great control over our words. But to be able to control our words in a way that we're always actively speaking of something holy, something connected with the Torah, something the Torah would approve of, whether it's the study of Torah, whether it's giving a compliment, whether it's using clean, positive language to build up ourselves or build others. That's how we connect our words with the soul and with Torah. And then, of course, in our behavior, in our good deeds. Now, there's one final part to today's study, which is a groundbreaking idea of the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe says, what does it mean when we say that the expression of the emotions of the soul is through the way we behave, the way we conduct ourselves in the performance of mitzvot and good deeds? What connection do emotions have with behavior? Emotions are feelings, not behaviors. So the Alter Rebbe says as follows: you should know that the two general emotions, which are the right side and the left side, as we learned, are ahava and yira, which is love for God, love for truth, and then yira, the fear or the awe of God and truth. And then we go about performing all the good deeds, which we want to do, which is doing the mitzvah, doing that which is right, and refraining from doing that which is wrong. Says the Alter Rebbe, the only true, genuine way to perform a mitzvah is when it's inspired by the emotions of either love for God and for truth, or for fear and awe of God. Meaning, if you perform a mitzvah, a good deed, but it's devoid of the emotional excitement, the emotional motivation of the soul, then the mitzvah is not truly genuine. And on the flip side, what value is there for having an emotion of love, of awe, of respect, all of the deep emotions we have? An emotion is a feeling of the heart. But if it doesn't find its way into an expression, a visible, tangible expression in our thoughts, our words, and our deeds, then the emotion falls short. Because what value is just in feeling? Who gains from our feelings? So within ourselves, the feelings are very powerful to have, but in order that somebody else should gain, we have to carry through those feelings. They should find expression in actual good deeds and behavior. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, the emotion of love is the source for, should be the source for, the 248 positive commands of the Torah. Meaning, why are you doing a mitzvah? Why are you doing an act of kindness for somebody else? Why are you putting on the tefillin and guarding the Shabbat? It should be because you are inspired by an unbelievable love and excitement for God and for the Torah. And because of your love for him, therefore you say, how can I best please him? How can I do that which is right? By doing that which he instructs me to do. Similarly, if you have a loved one, right? A spouse or a child or a friend or whatever. So first of all, what value is there in your love for them if you don't actually go about and do something for them inspired by that love? And at the same time, if you're doing something nice for them, but it's not inspired by love, it's sort of mechanical, habitual, it's not a genuine good deed, right? Your spouse wants to see, I want to know that you love me in this and that you're doing this because you're inspired by love for me. So the ultimate litmus test of a true mitzvah is if inspired by love for Hashem. And the same is with the 365 prohibitive commands of the Torah. You don't do that which is wrong, that which is not allowed. Why aren't you doing it? Not because of habit, not because of that's the way you were raised, not because that's what everyone else does. What's someone else going to say about me? But you do it because of your yira for God. Yira means, it can mean on a lower level, it means your fear of Hashem. Meaning, just like you would be afraid to rebel and violate the will of the king, who knows the consequences of that? So you're afraid to violate the will of God, and therefore you're going to refrain from doing that which is wrong. or on a deeper level, a higher level, it's not so much about fear, about consequences, but it's about shame. It's about your dignity, your self-respect, and you say, the awesome king who loves me and is asking me to do this or not to do that and giving me these instructions out of great awe and respect for the king, it would be shameful for me to do something that would be unbecoming of me and that would remove my dignity and remove my connection with and my love for this king. And so therefore you refrain from doing all those things which the Torah says are inappropriate or wrong. So in summary, today we've learned about the three garments of the soul, how we can always utilize our thoughts and our words and our behavior to be expressions of the true teachings and values of the Torah, and to recognize that a true mitzvah, a good deed, is only when it's inspired by the emotions of love and awe for God. And it's in that way that we express our true emotions to Hashem, through the good deeds that we choose to do, or the way we refrain from saying or thinking or doing that which we should not be doing. More about these garments and their functions and their abilities and their potential tomorrow. Have a Shavua Tov. Happy Chanukah.